Hi boys and girls, we're going to talk about Steve Saint and his family moving down to Ecuador to live with the Wadani natives down there in the tropical rainforest. You may remember that Ginny was a little bit concerned. That was Steve's wife. They had met, ironically, in Ecuador, but she was scared. She had gone down to visit with him and see the place, and she wasn't sure she could handle it, except that she had a beautiful voice. And she was singing, and the Wadanis heard her voice and were drawn to the place where they were staying and listening outside as she sang, and they just thought it was wonderful what she could do. And that convinced her to go, but they had to get ready. So they went back up into the United States, into Florida, where their family was. Steve had to go back down to find a place to live. Now, they could have gone to Aunt Rachel's house, but he wanted to live more centrally, where the people from the different villages could come and visit him, and he could go to see them. So he was looking for another place, and they found a place. He took two of the Wadanis with him, and they found a place that was a beautiful place, except it was all jungle. Nobody lived there, but it was a good place, because Goba said this would be a good place to not only build your house, but to put down an airstrip, because it took them almost a week to walk to this place. An airplane could have flown to it in 10 minutes if there had been an airstrip, but there wasn't any airstrip. There was just jungle there all over the place. So he went back, they found it, and then he went back home and he got some supplies. And he took his brother-in-law, that is Ginny's husband, who was a big farmer up in Minnesota. He had big tractors and farms up there and combines and all that. But it was wintertime up there, so they weren't doing a lot of farming. And he was a good carpenter as well. So he and Steve went back down to begin to build this place, and they went back in. Now, they took some things with them. See, clearing an airstrip could take 2 or 3 years if you just used the tools that the Wadanis had. So a machete, cutting down a big tree, that's going to be pretty hard to do. So he took back a chainsaw. And you can cut through a chainsaw pretty good with, cut through a tree with a chainsaw much faster than you could. Now, when the Wadanis saw it, they were scared. They'd never seen anything like this. They didn't know what this was all about. It was terrifying. But he taught them how to use it. And they were able to cut down trees to clear off that airstrip and to also begin to build a house. Now, they cut poles down and trimmed them off to put them in the ground so that they would have a house. Now, you remember, this was what the house looked like. It was on poles and it was up off the ground like that. They had to do that. The Wadanis just took like branches and trees and built the sides. They would bind them together with vines, grapevines and other vines. Steve had taken back hammers and some nails. And they took a chainsaw and they would cut down the tree, and then they would cut boards, slice the boards with the chainsaw. I've never seen that done, but that's how they did it. And they cut the boards for the house so that they could build a house. Now, it wasn't a fancy house because the top just had a tarp over it. But again, it's not going to get terribly cold, although it can get cold at night in the tropical rainforest, but it's not going to get terribly cold. And if you have a blanket, that's enough to keep you warm through the night. So they did that. Now, they also had trees that they cut down where the airstrip was going to be. What are we going to do with those stumps? He tried to dynamite them. Didn't work. So they had to have picks. This is a Maddox. Has a sharp blade on one end, and the other is a blade to pull things up. He took back some Maddoxes. Now, they still had their help me, George.
Machete.
Machete, thank you, that they used and for trimming the trees. But they had to clean out all those stumps. And they got a good start on it with Steve and his brother-in-law, who's also called Steve, to get that ready. Now, when they got that partially done, Steve, the two, went back up to the United States. Steve Saint had to get more supplies, and he brought back his 3 sons. His brother-in-law had to go back up and take care of the farm, but he brought back his 3 sons. That left Ginny and Steph, his daughter, back in Florida. They came back now, and they were able to go by boat and take in supplies that they had, and they again continued to build the house, and they were gone for about 3 months. That's a long time to be apart from your family, because he'd already been apart for almost a half a year getting started on this thing. But they got the airstrip cleared. They got the house pretty well built. They put a floor in it. They only had 1/4 of the floor down. So you could walk around 1/4 of the house, but the other, you'd fall through if you walked on that part of the house. Now, they were going to get it done in time, but they just didn't have it done yet. But they were going to get it. So anyway, Steve goes back out, and the 3 sons stay there with the other people. And Steve goes out to get Ginny and Steph, to bring them back into, because they got the airstrip done, and he had flown out and back with the plane, and he was going out, and he told the boys, I'm going out to get your mom and sister. Well, it almost came as a shock to them, but he did. He came out, and he brought them back, and here's that picture of Ginny, and here's Steph with her as they come in and they see this house. Now, you remember what the house was like where they were in Florida? Much like your houses and stuff. But this was what was going to be. And Ginny looked at it, and you know what she said? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You know why it was beautiful? Because her family was all together again. They'd been separated over time for almost a year now. And now they were together. And it might be a jungle, and it might be hard, but Mom had her family back together. And they were happy with that. Now, there were some things they didn't have. Thomas's English muffins. You know, the Wadanis had never heard of Thomas's English muffins. And not only that, but they didn't have flour. So, now I'm not talking about flowers that grow up and have a blossom. I'm talking about flowers they make bread with. They didn't have flour. They didn't have grains to grow with. There wasn't going to be any breakfast cereal, because they didn't have cereal. But even if they had cereal, they didn't have milk. The Wadanis have no animals that they use for milk. Now, there are animals that are used in different places in South America, goats in particular, llamas, that they can use the milk of those animals, but they weren't around where the Wadanis lived. So, would you imagine giving up cereal? If you like cereal, and this is nutty butter, it's got peanut butter in it. Oh, this is good cereal. And I love Thomas's English muffins with butter. No, can't have butter. Need cow's milk or some kind of milk for butter. No, can't have that. Jam, put jam. No, they don't have strawberries and blackberries and peaches. And no, we're not going to have that. Oh my goodness. Well, what could they have? Well, they had candles. And over here, let me get this out. Some of you are going to remember this. I forgot to get this out, but I want to bring it over for you to see, because I use this a lot when I go camping with my family and with the church kids. This is a lantern, and you can put fuel in it and pump it up, and it gives you a bright light. Well, when Steve first lit this, oh my goodness, the Wadanis fled from it because it was so bright. They were used to just a torch to see with at night from their campfire. So they had this, and this they brought back, which gave them more light, and they could use it. Now, they had to be sparing because they didn't have a lot of fuel, but they had that. A lot of times they used this little candle that they set on the table, and it would give them some light at night. Now, it wasn't all hard, because when Steve came back the second time, he brought back a TV. Can you imagine that? Brought back a TV that had a built-in VCR player. Now, some of you kids don't have any idea what a VCR player is, but they played a thing like this. Today, you get a DVD, but this was back in the 90s, and VCRs were a big thing. And he took the TV with the VCR back, and he took back this video, the Jungle Book. Can you imagine that? The Wadanis seeing a Jungle Book. This was based in India, but they had tropical rainforests in India too. And he took that. Well, they would plug that into a battery at nighttime. And the Wadanis they couldn't understand the English in the movie, but they were thrilled with these movies. And he had some of his brother-in-law's farm with the big tractors, and they couldn't imagine a tractor like that. So they was. Now, how did they charge the batteries? Well, if you have things at your house, something like this is a solar panel. Well, they had bigger ones. And so they could charge up their batteries during the day, and they could plug them in at nighttime, and the people would come off from all over the place to watch the movies. It was a great opening for Steve and Jenny and the family to have that. And of course, they just thought that this family was so great to have them there. Now, there was still no kitchen. Had to cook on a Coleman stove or open fire. There was no bathroom. You had to walk out into the forest, and there was an outhouse that Steve built for his family, but it was still out in the forest. There was no washing machines. Jenny had to go down to the creek, the river, and wash the clothes and then hang them up to dry. And you had to get them dry because it was going to rain almost every day. You want to take a bath? That's what the creek was for. And you did that. But there was so much that she was so thankful for that she could have there. And then one more thing happened. One more thing happened. Well, let me tell you this as well. They brought Jenny a big catfish. Jenny had never fixed catfish. Big catfish, a lot of catfish in the river. They brought it to her, and she just stood there and said to herself, I don't know what to do. Marga, one of the Wadani women, could see the anxiety on her face, and she came over and took that catfish, walked away, brought back later filleted catfish slices, wrapped up in banana leaves, and gave them to her. That was kind of the acceptance and love that these people began to show to Ginny and to Steve and to their 4 kids as they came and lived among them. Now, there's a lot more things that happened, but I'm going to stop with this. Marga one day came and brought a bundle, like that catfish wrapped up, brought a bundle to Steve and said, this is for you. Do you know what was in that bundle? I'm going to tell you next week what was in that bundle. It's a very big surprise. Okay? Let's have prayer together, boys and girls, and then we'll talk about that bundle next week, because it is a bundle of joy. All right. Father, thank you for your grace and goodness to us this day, and for all good things that you have for us, but especially being with our families and being loved. And just like Jenny was so thankful to be with her family again. All this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Now, remember they had that light. Could be the big light of the Coleman lantern. Could be a little light of a candle. Either way, it was all brand new for the Wadanis. They didn't know any of that. Now they'd seen candles because Steve had candles before. But the Coleman lantern, they just marveled that you could light up the forest in the dark. Because they just didn't, they never experienced that. So we're going to sing This Little Light of Mine. And you probably know that. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Now, they didn't have bushel baskets back there and that, but they could have hid it under the house. Wouldn't do any good, except when it went on the floor, and then it could have shined up. But you don't hide it, you put it out where people can benefit from it. So, hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine all the time. Except that we can let our light shine all the time. They would light it at nighttime. And the Wadanis knew how to create fire. That was an amazing thing. They could create fire with friction and do it and get a fire going at night. We would use matches. But they knew how to do it with friction. Anyway, that's our story for today. Next week we'll find out about that bundle of joy and some other exciting things that happened. Because Steve, I'm going to tell you how he got an airplane and use that so he could fly in and out of his place. All right? Thank you, boys and girls. See you next week.